Welcome back to WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. All of our Baltimore Positive programming brought to you by our friends at Taharka. I brought in Luke, before we get going here and bitch more about the Ravens and talk about Thanksgiving, I'm going to talk about some of the good things going on here in the city. You see there's a circle of love right there, and this is literally the box you'll get if you order our $15.70 discount. Now, what you won't get are empty wake and bake. This is an empty. You'll get a full one. And it'll actually come. The other one, I can throw them around. Peanut butter cup. Look, I recommend any of these, but if you haven't had the sweet potato casserole yet, that's going to be the one you want. The eggnog. We're doing this. Our partners at Sporticulture, our friends at Royal Farms and Planet Fitness and Royal Farms. And I said Royal Farms. But Royal Farms is in the cold roofing mug. We're very appreciative of them, as well as Doug Workman and Matt Stover, who did a new little radio commercial here this week for our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions. So we've made the move. We're discounting ice cream. We hope you order. You may need some ice cream for the next couple of weeks. You may want to get 2 boxes before it's all over with, and choose wisely on your flavors. Luke, we've got a real crisis here in Purple Land, don't we? And, you know, I've talked about these post-game videos being hostage videos, and people ask us what goes on in locker rooms, and over 25 years of writing books and giving speeches and doing Ravens Roost and doing Zooms. And I'm actually giving a speech on advertising and leadership to West Virginia University on Monday night via the Zoom thing. I look to this and say these are strange times all the way around. I know you and I have talked about an empty stadium and Harbaugh out jawing with Vrabel. Now we have a Thursday night game up in Pittsburgh for no one in particular other than the whole world. You know, eating their they've even moved the Egg Bowl down in Mississippi for this game on Thursday nights now. And I think we're all worried about what's going on here, but I think there really should be questions about leadership. And again, I'm not even bringing this on Harbaugh as much as the players. Harbaugh's got a ring. DeCosta's got a ring. They're good at this. They brought players together. They have injuries. But the residue of real leadership and winning football games is standing up. And I don't know who the hell Derek Wolfe even is, but I was very impressed by him in the aftermath. I've never met him. I haven't met any of these guys, right? And it's not like I got Chad Steele on the hotline and saying, hey, get Marlon Humphrey on for breakfast on Tuesday morning. We'll talk to him about such things. But I do see who's hiding and who's coming out in the light in the aftermath of these games. And, you know, 25 years into this, I don't mind calling that what it is. And I know John Harbaugh's not going to hide because, like, we always had fun with the old Major League Lou Baker, you know, I'm not going to hide behind lockers here, Jones.
Yeah, too old to go diving into a locker. Lou Brown, the great Lou Brown. But I hear you, and I think – I mean, I can recall times where we would talk about Ray Lewis ducking out of the back door of the locker room. That
Which he did, by the way.
You know, that happened on occasion with Terrell Suggs. So let's be very
Chris
clear about that.
With Chris McAllister was a way of life. You know what I mean? Like, no, I'm just saying, like, the people I've covered that John Ogden never did that. John Ogden never did that, right? Like,
But
Suggs rarely did that, by the way. Suggs always stood up. You know, they lost to plenty when Suggs was around. He stood at his locker, and he rarely ran. So I give him a lot of credit for that. And I don't usually give him credit for much.
Yeah, but we're in such a different environment now where it's not a case of they can go hide in the trainer's room while you're sitting or standing there in the locker room waiting by their locker to talk to them. And, you know, look, I mean, that's reality with the pandemic right now. I'm not complaining about that. That's where we are. But it's added another layer of resistance, so to speak, or a layer, you know, it's added another barrier for access. And, you know, I do look at it and look, I don't know. I'm not trying to throw any individual under the bus, but when you look at after Sunday's game, they blow up a 2-score lead in the third quarter. They'll lose a game that they were winning by 2 scores in the second half at home. That's something that, and I know home field advantage is different now, and I understand that this is a weird season, but when I'm looking at the post-game lineup and, okay, Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson, the head coach and quarterback, that's a guarantee. That's a given, right? But beyond that, Derek Wolfe, who's been here several months, J.K. Dobbins, who's a rookie, Patrick Queen, who's a rookie, Orlando Brown, who's in his third year, which, okay, I mean, he's the veteran guy on the offensive line now at this point. I mean, especially with Skura
Well, he had
going
a
into a reserve
grown-ass
role.
man for a father. Let me tell you that, And I liked his
No
father more
question.
than I like him, quite frankly. And I knew his father well. And his father wasn't a duck out of the locker room guy, not all 6'9" of them, or whatever it was, 6'7" of them. All of this makes me
He talked
itch
on
while
Sunday
I
is my
watch on
point, but
television, Yeah.
I just, I find it not unusual. I find it curious that some of the highest paid players on the team, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, when the defense absolutely collapsed down the stretch, and it's Derek Wolfe and a rookie inside linebacker talking after the game. Now, again, were those players asked and they said no? Were the players not asked? Did they duck out of the locker room before anyone from PR could even talk to them? And again, I know a lot of fans are going to listen to this and say, I don't care about that, Luke and Ness. And I get that to a degree. But if we're going to be talking about leadership and
It's
we're
what
going to
I'm
be
going to
talking
be
about
writing about
accountability,
between now and Thursday night, by the way, buddy.
the reality
Because
is
winning teams don't have this going on.
well,
And they're not a winning team right now.
But my point is not that it's about not talking to the media. It's that someone in that locker room, some players are going to have to inevitably, and that's part of league rules. And you're leaving rookies and guys who haven't been around here as long to be the ones to do that. And to me, that's not complaining about the media access again. Most fans aren't going to care about that nearly as much, and I don't expect them to. But is it indicative of some of the leadership questions that we're talking about right now? Where look, it's great to ham it up for post-game locker room and interviews and all that stuff, and showing off on social media. And this isn't a Ravens thing. This is the
Well,
league
where's Mark
now.
Ingram in the post game to step up and say, "I'll tell you what's going on, guys. Let me out there, Chad. Let me at him. I'm going to go out there and stand up and say this is unacceptable." I'd even accept that to some degree as a voice. And who's on the leadership council? Like, there was a point for me, and I didn't want to get flippant with Harbaugh because, he's got work to do this week. You know what I mean? I'm not going to point at John Harbaugh as the problem with the franchise right now because I'm not a dumbass. And especially 3 days into getting ready for Pittsburgh. But I would love to know the makeup of the leadership council they have now and the credentials and the qualifications of that versus what it looked like when it was Joe Flacco and Ray Lewis and Matt Burke and Anquan Bolden. I'm just, and that's a championship room, and that's different versus even last year where I don't, you tell me who was the leadership council last year. Certainly Yonda was a part of that. Lamar better be a part of that. I hear Mark Andrews, or I feel like he's sort of moving into that groove of that, right? Defensively, it would be Brandon Williams, right? It would have been Eric Weddle 2 years ago. They wanted it to be Earl Thomas last year, and it's not. And I guess now maybe it is Matt Judon and Marlon Humphrey, which, maybe that's not top flight leadership. Maybe there's a good football players, but I don't know where. I'm wondering where their heart is right now because I saw the head coach go down there and get in a fist fight like Braveheart with 65 guys on the other side, right out of the Brian Billick grabbing the spear and the Banshee thing from Tennessee 21 years ago. And then I see guys that, don't want to come out and answer questions after the game, making $20 million a year. It's a little weird to me, and especially with Pittsburgh around the corner and not around the corner they're up on the dashboard right now. They're not even on the, they're not even in the headlights. Here they come. We're going to blink and be eating turkey here. And the season's really in the balance, right? Thursday night, even a good showing that they lose in Pittsburgh, they're not going to get any style points. If they lose to Pittsburgh on Thursday night, I don't want to say the season's a wash, but all of a sudden making the playoffs becomes this, the lowest rung on the hook. I don't know. That's a whole different place from where this franchise thought it was 3 weeks ago.
No question about it. It goes back to the standard being elevated after what happened last year. You go 14-2, you're going to become a I don't want to say a victim of your own success, but the expectations have changed. And we talked about that last January. But going back to what you're saying about leadership, here's the reality, Nestor. How many guys are on this current roster that forget about the Super Bowl, which is now 8 years in the rearview mirror? How many guys on this current roster have won a playoff game for the Baltimore Ravens? I'm looking at it right now. Sam Cook, Morgan Cox, Jimmy Smith, Anthony Levine, Justin Tucker, Brandon Williams in his second year, Pernell McPhee, who was his last year in Baltimore was 2014, of course, came back last year. That's it. Now, Calais Campbell's been to a Super Bowl, but that was his rookie year. Now, Derek Wolfe has won a Super Bowl elsewhere. There isn't that core group of your true established leaders that have been through the wars in the same way that you mentioned some of those other guys of yesteryear. And look, that's not a knock on Marlon Humphrey. That's not a knock on Mark Andrews. It's not a knock on Lamar Jackson. These guys are early in their careers, but this is when it comes into question when you start hitting some bumps in the road as far as, to your point, who's establishing themselves as the leaders in there? Who's saying, guys, we're good, we're fine? It's easy for guys to say that, but who is delivering that message and everyone's buying in? And that can't just be the head coach. I look, and this is taking nothing away from John Harbaugh. I mean, his credentials speak for themselves, but that you have to have some guys in that locker room from a veteran standpoint who have been through some of those wars and they know how to respond. And look, can Jimmy Smith be that guy to some degree? Sure. Is Jimmy the most vocal, in your face kind of guy? Not really. Look, I love Sam Cook, but your punter's not going to be the guy that's going to rally your locker room at times like this. So you are, and it is a reminder of just how young this team really is. And I think that's where it is interesting. I was actually thinking about this late Sunday night, as I was kind of editing some audio and kind of looking at some numbers. And I was thinking to where they were in 2018 and what the expectations were going into 2019. I believe I picked the Ravens to go 9-7 and to make the playoffs as a wild card team. And I kind of think if what we're seeing right now, meaning this team right now that's 6-4 and their defense has been really good, although it's had trouble finishing over the last 4 or 5 weeks, their offense has a good running game, passing game, not so much, but they're 6-4. If what we're seeing now had taken place last year, I think most people now you would still have your ups and downs, and fans are going to react strongly to wins in a positive way, and they're going to, a certain segment of a fan base. And this is all 32 teams. This isn't a Ravens fan thing. I'm not knocking the Ravens fans saying this, but you're always going to have a certain segment of the fan base that the sky is falling after every loss. But if the Ravens had been 6-4 and kind of had this profile a year ago, I would think we would have a much different perspective. But to your point that you made, when you go 14-2 and you have 13 guys in the Pro Bowl and you set NFL rushing records and you're the first team in league history to average 200 passing yards and 200 rushing yards, and you have the MVP at quarterback, and you just go through the win a franchise record 12 games in a row. I mean, that's a magical season there. And we saw how it ended. And this is why when I heard people say, well, they were ahead of schedule, and they're look at all these guys they're bringing back, and they're going to have all this cap space, and Lamar's going to be a year older, and Marquise Brown's going to be truly healthier. It doesn't always fit into place perfectly like it did last year. And again, Sunday was another reminder of just how damn painful that January loss was, because things don't fall into place like that very often. I mean, the Ravens in 25 years, they've had 2 years of 13-3 or better. And they've had, 3 times they've had a first-round bye, 2006 and 2011, and, of course, last year. There's always this thought that development is this steady, linear progression that you just keep going up, and it doesn't happen that way. Brian Billick famously said after the Ravens won the Super Bowl, and everyone can remember the NFL films of Ozzie going up to him and joking and said, well, you could have done it last year. And what did Brian say? Well, they'd run me out of town sooner then. There's not always this just graduation. Sometimes you're just there and you do it. And that's what this team had a chance to do last year. And this year we're finding out, and look, we don't know what's going to happen over the next 2 months. Maybe we're talking about a Lombardi trophy in 2.5 months, but it doesn't always go to plan, and you don't stay as healthy as you did last year, and the schedule may not set up as favorably. And
by the way, one of my favorite expressions in sports was born out of the Ravens Gerback season. And I don't know, we were 5 or 6 weeks in, and this is before the internet or Twitter. Some very wise Ravens fan, probably from Parkville, said on the radio, last year was a long, long time ago. Last season was a long, long time ago. And I think you can apply that as a sports fan, and maybe that's where we are in life in 2020 too, right? Last year was a long time ago, no matter who you are or what it is, but certainly for any sports team. And that would be across sports, across the history of our lives, that year to year, trying to compare this year to last year in anybody's batting average in baseball is it's foolish. It's interesting from a comparison standpoint. And I know Harb always says, I don't get into comparisons. We don't compare and contrast. Whatever. We all compare. We always do. I'll compare
including
this year's
him
Thanksgiving dinner to last year's Thanksgiving dinner. I'll compare to Harka sweet potato ice cream to the eggnog ice cream. That's just what I do. But, I do think that's true for anyone. And I think that's the hardest thing when you're 14-2 to believe, not that you're going to be 15-1, but that, wow, how far could we fall? Maybe 12-4 would still be pretty good, right? And you find out that it really doesn't work that way. And again, I think it's really difficult these couple of days here with the short track and the Steelers and the aftermath of the loss to say, well, they did have a 10-point lead late. I mean, they were that close to not feeling our scorn and wrath here for 72 hours leading up to Thursday, that they were pretty close to staying on track and getting it done and punching back and beating the Titans and moving on, but they didn't. And then this happened.
Yeah. And that's where you fall into dangerous territory when you start talking like that. Not you, but when you're a football team and you're starting to talk like that. When you're hearing guys say, we just need to finish. Or, we heard this a lot in the first half of the season, the offense, when their guys would get questions about it not clicking to the same degree that it did last year. You'd hear a lot of guys say, what? Well, we didn't really get going until the second half of the season last year. And that was totally true. But because it happened last year doesn't mean that's going to happen again. And you almost felt there was, and I don't think guys were doing this deliberately, and I don't think it's some major character flaw. I think it's human nature in a lot of ways, that there was they thought that they could flip a switch. And when you have that kind of mentality, that's complacency right there. I mean, that really is what it is. And look, I mean, the Ravens wouldn't be the first team that that's happened to. I recall, I think it was a day or two after the Titans playoff loss, I looked at the last 5 teams, I think it was, that had been 14-2. I want to say 14-2 or better, and the number 1 seed, and had lost in the divisional round. And I don't think any of those teams won the Super Bowl the following year. In fact, I know Dallas in 2016, they didn't even make the playoffs the next year, if I remember correctly. So, there's always this thought that things are going to stay the same. And we say it all the time, though, right? NFL, not for long. And it's not to say the Ravens are doomed. And that's not to say that if they bow out in the first round of the playoffs this year and they don't win a playoff game, that then they can't break through next year. But it's just a reminder of, you don't have those harmonious, near perfect seasons like they had a year ago very often. And that was one reason, I picked the Ravens to win the Super Bowl this year. I picked them to have a 12-4 record. I picked them to not be the number 1 seed. So
you fell right into they were good last year, so they'll be good this year. But that's
but
that's
I didn't
what we
pick
do,
them to
right?
go. But I also didn't pick them to go 15-1. I didn't assume they were going to be the number 1 seed again. I absolutely expected some regression on the offensive side of the ball. And look, they could still end up finishing 12-4 for all I know. I'm not betting on it at this point. They could still easily go 11-5, even if they lose Thursday night. December, currently through week 11, their December opponents are a combined 16-33-1. There is one team in the month of December that they play that has a winning record. It's Cleveland, which I'm not diminishing the challenge of going into Cleveland on a Monday night and playing a Browns team that you have to give some credit to. They're 7-3. Whether you think they're truly that great or not, that's their record right now. So if they can, even if they don't go into Pittsburgh and get a win, there's still a great opportunity for them to right themselves. But you keep looking at this thing, even just from an eyeball test. And we talked about the eyeball test a lot early in the season when they were beating Washington or they were beating Cincinnati. And you'd say, well, they won, but you kind of looked at that. The offense, they made some big plays in the Washington game. Otherwise, didn't do a whole lot. Against Cincinnati, the defense was tremendous and really propped up the offense. It didn't do a whole lot in that game. So you kind of look at that, and it's great to say, okay, that's the eyeball test, but they were 5-1, through the bye week. But now you're seeing them lose some games. They blew up a 2-score lead against Pittsburgh. They lost on the road to a New England team that I think, again, on Sunday proved that's not a good Patriots team that they lost to last week. They didn't have any kind of breakthrough this week. So you look at that, and a Tennessee team that had a bad defense on paper, and they were missing a few defensive starters, and they were missing starters on the offensive line. And the Ravens, they had it, and then they let it slip through their fingers. So, I think there's a mental challenge to this that is really difficult to quantify. You hear about it all the time, a Super Bowl hangover, the team that loses in the Super Bowl. You can go back to BaltimorePositive.com, and I thought at the time that this was going to be, this offseason and this regular season was going to be a grind for this team. And I compared it a little bit to the Super Bowl hangover for the loser, but the difference is the Ravens didn't even have a playoff win to hang their hat.
Well, you only get to win a meaningful game in January, and now they're going to have to figure out how to even get there. That's the only thing they can do. To your point, all of these Marlon Humphreys and all of these Orlando Browns and Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson, I could see Malcolm Butler standing out and saying, "You ain't one-ish." You know what I mean? Like literally, before the game. Like,
he's not wrong, by the way. I mean,
you don't want us standing on your logo. Maybe you should have beat us.
Yeah, and again, I mean, that whole thing, whatever.
I'm just saying that's the way they think.
Sure, no question.
I'm not a WWE actor.
But it does speak to the mental side of this and the psychology, the psychological side of this, where I said it after they lost to Kansas City. I even wrote it. There's a long, thankless road to January at this point, because the Chiefs were kind of the one at that point, what we thought was the one major eyeball test, litmus test, however you wanted to describe it, to kind of check that box and say, all right, they beat the Chiefs. They're ready now. They're ready to get over the hump in January. They're ready to get to a Super Bowl. Well, they lost to the Chiefs, and they lose to Pittsburgh when Steelers came to town undefeated, and even though they outgained them and outplayed them, and you can talk about all that, well, they committed 4 turnovers and lost. Tennessee, not that the Titans have been great. I mean, the Titans came into this football game having lost 3 of 4. They'd been struggling more than the Ravens had, probably, if we're going to just try to size it up. And they were banged up, and they're dealing with injuries and relying on young players. They got the job done, and the Ravens didn't. So you keep looking at this, and it feels like they're moving further away from the ultimate goal than moving toward that. And look, they go to Pittsburgh on Thursday and win, and they go 4-1 or 5-0 in the month of December. We're singing a much different tune about this team going into January, but you just look how it's trending, and I don't know. I look, and this is where I keep coming back to me, the theme of the game was, we always talk about how last year this team was so complementary, right? Their defense and their offense fed off each other, and throw the special teams being elite into that as well. What we saw on Sunday was, to me, it looked like a defense and an offense waiting for the other side of the ball to finish off the game, and no one ultimately did it. And that's concerning, because we've talked about how the offense has struggled, but now you quietly look at how the defense has been playing in the second half of some of these games over the last 5 to 6 weeks, and statistically, it still looks very strong. And again, they did not have Brandon Williams and Calais Campbell. I think we need to stress that, and they will get them back at some point. Maybe not Thursday night, but they should get them back at some point in the next couple weeks. And you hope you'll have them healthy for the stretch run in January. But I still look at a team that, I'm looking at them and I am questioning the mental toughness a little bit, in terms of handling that adversity, in terms of taking a punch, so to speak. I use the boxing analogy, and the Ravens were the heavyweight that just plowed through everyone last year, and Tennessee delivered a punch in January. And you kind of look, since they finished 14-2 last year, 12 since they had their 12-game winning streak, this team's 6-5 over its last 11 games. Not terrible, but nothing to write home about, nothing to be impressed over. And it's just that's a concerning kind of state of where they are right now. And then you throw the injuries into it, you throw some of the questions about coaching or play calling, which I'll hear that. I'm not going to totally absolve the coaching staff by any means, but you just kind of look at the whole mix, and it really, and we talked about this after the Stanley injury especially, it's really feeling at this point like this isn't their year. And it's a lot of football left. Want to be very clear about that. And I probably said something similar to you in 2012, or I probably said something similar to my dad in 2000 when the Ravens couldn't score a touchdown for 5 straight games. But you do look at this, and it just keeps, the evidence keeps building up against what they ultimately want to accomplish. And that we need to start seeing some progress in some of the areas, some of their deficiencies, or it feels like, I think they'll get in, but feels like it'll be another early January exit. But long way to go until then. They've got to figure out a way how to solve this Pittsburgh defense that is pretty tough. And let's face it, Lamar Jackson has not, albeit just a couple games, but has not played his best football against the Pittsburgh Steelers, even going back to that early season game last year.
All right, we'll be talking about that. Luke and I will be doing more segments between now and Thursday night, just in time for Thanksgiving dinner. We're also going to be doing a huge promotion with our brothers over at Taharka, and we're going to be delivering ice cream, $15.70 off the $56 delivery to your door, coming to you for just over $40 for the holidays. You pick the flavors to your door, and supporting local people here. I think the big message here is we are local. We are fiercely local, like all of our brothers around here and all of our supporters, and we appreciate their support at the Harker Brothers. So we'll be telling you more about that later on in the week. You can find Luke at Baltimore Luke and on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all the places that we are out at the former WNST.net. That's now BaltimorePositive.com.